This is Keith Howard from Cops Corrections Videos. If you like my videos, please hit the red subscribe button. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about the evolution of electronic control devices. Now, I started in this business in 1977. I started in corrections, worked my way up and, made captain and all that kind of good stuff. But I'm not here to talk about my personal history. I'm here to talk about electronic control devices. Now, the first electronic control device that I can recall ever being used was called the Ultron 2. The Ultron 2 was basically a pain compliance control device. It had two prongs on the end, and you basically had to make contact with the individual. It didn't shoot anything out. It was a contact device. It was reminiscent of a cattle prod. Now, for those of you who don't know what a cattle prod is, a cattle prod, my grandpa had one, and I remember my dad nailing me on the butt with it once, and it hurt like hell. But it's basically the same thing. It's an electronic control device that's used to move cattle. Well, the Ultron 2 was pretty much the same thing. The only problem with the Ultron 2, as I said, is you had to get up close and personal to use it. Now, I've used it on numerous occasions when I worked in corrections, but like all electronic control devices, it doesn't always work. I recall one specific incident where we were going to try to quell the possibility of a riot in one of the dormitories. And myself and a group of officers went down there. I had an Ultron 2. And out of nowhere, an inmate came and cold-cocked one of my officers and broke his jaw. Well, I grabbed the inmate. I had my handy-dandy Ultron 2, and I nailed him in the back with it. And it gave about a 1-second shot before the little door on the battery compartment broke off, and it was completely useless. So, we can't rely on the electronic control devices. In another situation, we had a man who basically had emotional and mental problems, who was pretty much impervious to the pain caused by it. And as a result, I had an officer almost get his thumb bitten off because we could not control this inmate using an electronic control device. Now, fast forward from that. That was probably in the early 90s. Late 90s, tasers came about. Tasers are great. When a taser works, it is absolutely fantastic. The problem is that studies have shown that the taser has about a 60% efficiency rating. 60% of the time, it's going to work. 40%, it's not. Now, would you load your handgun knowing that 40% of your rounds are going to be ineffective? We've all seen the videos where people have been shot with a taser and they go down like a brick. Now, I got shot with a taser. I decided that if I'm going to carry one, I want to know what it feels like. I didn't go down. I froze where I was, and I was immobilized, but I didn't go down. Now, I've used a taser on numerous occasions, and it's been effective, but I've also been involved in situations where someone's used a taser, and it's been totally ineffective. There are ways that criminals are learning on how to deal when they get shot with a taser, making it ineffective. We rely on the taser too much. We've got other tools on our belt that aren't deadly force. I have a baton. I have OC. I've had some hands-on training. Hopefully I don't have to go hands-on. But if I do, I'm confident enough in my training to know that I'm going to do what I have to survive. Now, I was watching the police cam on one of the channels, cable channels the other night. They had a situation in which a sergeant and an officer went to the scene of a domestic disturbance, and when the sergeant started to walk in the house, he saw the man had a shotgun. Okay, they backed out, which is entirely appropriate. They backed out of the house and took up defensive positions. They called for backup. Now, it must have been a rural community because there wasn't a whole lot of backup coming. But at one point, they saw the man go into the garage, and the officer ordered him onto the ground. The sergeant ordered him onto the ground. Now, you need to realize that this man had already shown them that he had a firearm. He had a shotgun. The sergeant approached him, holstered his pistol, and took his taser out, and told the man to remain where he was on the ground. Well, the man had a pistol, and he shot that sergeant 4 times. One of the shells hit him in the chest. One of them hit him the arm, another one went under his vest and into his abdomen. The sergeant was in very serious condition. Due to the circumstances, they weren't able to evacuate him right away, and he almost died. Now, everybody hates people who have 20/20 hindsight and second guess. But in a situation like this, I can remember thinking when I saw him drawing the taser, why are you drawing your taser? This guy already showed you he has a gun. This guy already shows you he has a propensity and the capacity to use deadly force against you. And it was pretty interesting because in the aftermath, they interviewed the sergeant who did survive, and he said his biggest mistake was using the taser, that he should have kept his handgun out. You know, too often in our society today, people are afraid of lawsuits. Well, if you're so afraid of a lawsuit that it's going to cost you your life, is it worth it? You know, don't depend on the taser to be the be-all and end-all, that the taser is going to save your life. There's chances it's not going to help you. I've personally seen situations where a person's been tased, whether it's because they were wearing heavy clothing or whatever, that it had absolutely no effect on them. But what I'm getting at is we all want to go home at the end of the day. None of us wants to take a life. But in this business, you have to be prepared to take a life. If something happens, you have to be ready to do what you have to do, not only to protect others, but to protect yourself as well. You know, the recent situation in Michigan where the individual tried to disarm the officer and grab his taser. You know, I know people are up in arms right now saying that the officer used deadly force, he shouldn't have shot the man. Well, you know what? If somebody gets a hold of my taser and they shoot me with it, I know for a fact that there's a good 5 seconds where I'm going to be totally immobile. During those 5 seconds, that enables that individual to have access to all the tools on my belt, up to and including my firearm. It's put me in a position where my life is in danger. Do I feel that officer was justified in that shooting? Most certainly he was. I've watched the videos on that, and I didn't see a single thing that says that that officer isn't justified in using deadly force. We've got to remember all the force options available to us. Don't rely on any one. Don't rely on just your baton. Don't rely on just your OC. Don't rely on your taser. And certainly, don't rely on your firearm unless it's an absolute last resort. Until next time, this is Keith Helwig from Cops Corrections Videos. Stay safe and watch your back.